She's funny, she's smart, she craves chocolate every day, and she is the Greek goddess of comedy. Here is your host, Ellen Karis.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Karis's Comedy Corner. My name is Ellen Karis, and you're listening to the guest edition of Karis's Comedy Corner. I have a fantastic surprise guest for you today. I'm very, very excited. Before we get her on, though, have to thank our sponsors, Baywalk Marketing. Go to their website, baywalk.net, for all of your advertising and marketing needs. They can help you with a flyer, with your social media. They're experts in the Greek community. Go to their website, hollywoodgreeks.com, for all of your Greek entertainment needs, and HellenicFestivals.org to find out where there is a Greek festival near you. Also, our other sponsor is Select Flex. What is it? It's an orthotic. What's an orthotic? It's also called an insert. You put it in your shoe because support starts from the ground up. It helps you with your ankles and your hips and your entire alignment. And what is genius about this product is that there is an adjustability in the arch where you can adjust the arch firm, or extra firm, depending on what your needs are. It is boot season right now. They are perfect for boots. I put them in my Uggs. It gives me the support I need. Go to their website, selectflex.com, SELECTFLEX.com. You can see a 30-second video. And for Karis Comedy Corner listeners, there's a 25% discount. Just type in the code FAMILY25, FAMILY 25. Check them out. They are the greatest invention since suitcase on wheels. All right. I'm going to get our guest on, but I have to tell you a couple of things. Number one, we have never met. Number two, we've barely spoken other than when we got on this podcast for 2 seconds. I found her. It came to me on Instagram because she has one of the most interesting Instagram pages that I have ever seen. It is called Everything Lucille Ball. I'm a huge Lucille Ball fan. Lucille Ball is a historical figure, not just in TV, in life. This woman has made such an impact, certainly, obviously, in entertainment, but even in business, as did her husband, Desi Arnaz, the whole I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball franchise. But what was so incredible about this Instagram page that my guest, we're going to find out exactly how the whole thing came about, is it's not just random pictures of Lucille Ball or Vivian Vance or maybe an episode of Here's Lucy. It is in-depth information, background, scenes, pictures, people from behind the scenes. So we're going to find out exactly how this whole thing came together. If you are an I Love Lucy fan, you need to listen to this podcast and send it to all your I Love Lucy fan friends. And if you're not, you need, after this podcast, to go watch some I Love Lucy. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Kasy Long. Welcome. You are adorable.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
And
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy that you said, yeah, you're like, I've never done a podcast before. I'm like, it's fine. It's just me. Trust me. You'll be great. Okay. You are very young. And so, which I'm going to just say right off the top, because generationally, I don't know if you're in your 20s, right? And I only say you have that on your Instagram, or else I would never say a woman's age, but you have it on your Instagram and you look like a child. I don't know. I was shocked. Well, first of all, I was shocked that you were that young because I didn't know that your generation would even be interested in Lucille Ball or even know who she is or anything. So obviously you're a big fan. How did all that come about?
Well, it really started from my childhood. I grew up watching I Love Lucy with my mom. Mm-hmm. She is a huge fan of the show too. And so basically since I was 2 years old, I've been watching I Love Lucy, and I grew up, and I think it's one of the best shows a child could watch growing up. It just has so many great life lessons, love, marriage, friendship, and just being able to laugh at yourself too. And so that was always a great show to watch when I came home from school or on the weekends. It was just so great.
So where did you grow up?
Indiana. So I'm a Midwest gal.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Okay. Which part? Like rural or by Indianapolis or?
About an hour southwest of
Uh-huh.
Indianapolis. I grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Oh, Terre Haute, Indiana. Oh,
Mm.
oh, we. I have somebody that makes a joke about that town. Okay, as Alexa, not a bad joke. I'm just, like as
Okay.
reference to a random town, and so it's got a good funny name for a comic. I'm sure it's
Yeah,
loved.
it does.
And I bet there's comedy there because he talked about doing comedy there. So obviously, so we like Terre Haute, but
Okay, good.
so you still live there?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Uh-huh. And then so what do you do for work? Like what's your job?
Right. I worked for 4 years as a freelance writer. And
Uh-huh.
I'm a writer. And then I recently just started a new job in higher education. I'm a web content writer.
Okay, so if we go to your Instagram page, Everything Lucille Ball, it is very sophisticated. You have clips. First of all, I'm on social media. I don't know if I would be on social media if I weren't a comic, but I'm on it and I'm addicted to it. And that's probably what upsets me is I'm addicted to it. But the same token, when I find pages like yours and I'm looking through pictures of Lucille Ball and of I Love Lucy and of the then there were the Lucy shows and the Here's Lucy. I mean, you have it all. And Lucille Ball as Lucille Ball, the celebrity and actress on different talk shows and all of this and pictured with all of these people. Photos I've never seen before. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, this is great. It's like having a huge book. Like every time I go to your webpage, I feel like I've picked up another book about Lucille Ball.
Oh, thank you.
You are really so talented and I feel like I know something about this subject because I thought I read everything about her and I thought I knew everything about her. And sometimes when I'll watch like on, Reels or, some of these documentary shows and I see these people that were authors of a Lucy book. And I'm like, I wish I was a writer. Like, I wish I could have done that because that would have been my passion and so much fun to do. And these people like made a living out of talking about it.
Right.
But when I see your information, you completely blow these people away in all of the things that you're able to do. And here's the great part about you and your generation in doing that. It's like, you didn't have to try to encapsulate something in a book or two books. Like you have social media, you have Instagram, you just keep putting out content after content. So your love for Lucy started when you were young, like myself. Mm-hmm. Me watching it with my great grandmother, who was Greek, by the way. I'm all Greek, but my great grandmother, she was Cypriot, but Greek. And I have to tell you, and you'll appreciate this. We would watch, there were reruns. I'm old, but I'm not old where it was the originals when they aired. So it was, right. So I also watched the reruns. And here in New York, they were on 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. They were like in the morning, in the afternoon, at like 6 o'clock at night. And it was funny because my great grandmother was a fantastic woman, a very proper woman. And she would laugh, but she'd be like, "Oh, that Lucy, she's crazy. She's so crazy. Palavi is crazy in Greek, But she was mesmerized. She was addicted to, like, she would never not watch an episode. And she watched the Lucy show and she watched Here's Lucy, but she wouldn't admit how much she loved her. Like all she would talk about is how crazy she was, but meanwhile she never missed an episode.
Right.
It was so funny, because obviously she was incredibly old. She was older then, and in today's time she would be incredibly old. So it was almost like women weren't supposed to be act that silly.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely unique for Lucy Ricardo. Is just a completely wild, crazy character, but she's also relatable in many ways.
I watched it, and even today, with all that has transpired, and cell phones and the internet, and just I mean, my childhood feels so different in so many ways from the way I live now. Obviously as an adult, you grew up more in a cell phone era.
Right. Yeah.
We had these things, that I still have. Yeah. Just everything, just the way that people were. But it's still, like you said, it's still relatable. And for me, it's also like comforting too. It's like, so when it is on, it's not on in New York like it used to be. And I don't know about Netflix. I mean, I don't know if anybody's purchased those or not. I know they were just on like regular channels, but it's sometimes even just to have it on in the background, right? Because the episode, it just gives you like a feeling of nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a show that I always turn to if I just need to be put in a good mood. If I'm feeling sick or just sad, it's a show that I turn on and it just lets me forget about everything going on, and I laugh. And I mean, laughter is the best medicine.
Yes.
And it's true with I Love Lucy.
So on your Instagram page, and I urge everybody to check it out. And you have like 18,000 followers. I mean,
yeah,
that's a lot.
I know. It surprises me when I think about it, because I started the page in 2017. And thinking back, I never would have imagined that 18,000 people would want to follow my page. I was excited when I reached 100 followers back then.
See, good things are going to happen to you because you are almost like secretly talented. You're one of these people that you're going to slip through the cracks and some great stuff is going to happen to you. But it's not just, and it's not just a page. Like I said, it's got so much information. So you go back to when you post things about even Lucy as a child, her parents, her mother, her grandmother. And again, for all of us I Love Lucy fans, we know that her mother was a very big influence in her life. Her father died when she was very young. If you know the history, she was brought up in Jamestown. As a matter of fact, I have to ask you, have you been to Jamestown? Because Jamestown is dedicated to Lucille Ball.
Yes, I actually lived there for a summer. I worked at the Lucille Ball des Arnaz Museum for a summer. I was an intern.
Oh, wow.
1 year. Yeah.
Did you get college credit for it or anything? Or
I didn't get college credit, but I worked in the communications department, the office, and then I also worked part-time in the museum gift shop. And so I got to see so many people coming in who were big time I Love Lucy fans. And I just tried to talk to them about the show because I was very well informed about the show. And I always ask people what their favorite episode is and character. And it was often Fred Mertz was the most popular answer, that everyone loves Fred.
Very interesting. Well, good for you. So when did you do that? What year was that?
2016. So it was even before I started the Instagram. I wish I had the Instagram back then because I could have documented that entire summer.
So oh boy, you just keep surprising me. So do you live there? So what happened? So you got an apartment to rent and you decided to do it, and
yeah, I stayed in an extended stay hotel for that summer, and it was great. So much fun, and I learned a lot, but it was just meeting people who were fans of the show. And it was like the first time I really got to meet people who understood the love for I Love Lucy.
What's interesting? I don't know anything about Star Trek. I'm not a science fiction person at all. I don't understand it. It's just a foreign language to me. It just doesn't interest me. Mm-hmm. Although there is an I Love Lucy connection because Desi Arnaz was the producer of was Lucille Ball the producer of Star Trek?
Yeah, the story is that Lucy was not really the producer of it, but she convinced the network to sign on to do the pilots and that she funded the pilots. And so they say that if it wasn't for Lucy, Star Trek wouldn't have happened. So she was she saw the potential in the show.
Right. So my point also, I wanted to mention that, but I also wanted to say, so it's like, I'm talking to you as if like, this is the equivalent of Trekkies, you know, like all these conventions, these Comic-Cons and like the Marvel comics, like I don't get into any of that, but Jamestown, where the I Love Lucy Museum, excuse me, it's the Lucy and Desi Museum, and then all of and just everything around it. I have not been there. My sister and I, one of my sisters is also a big I Love Lucy fan. Her and I need to do a trip there. We need to. Our husbands have no interest whatsoever, but we will definitely. We definitely have to put that on the bucket list. And every year it seems to grow and grow. And the artifacts and you know what, you find this interesting. Oh gosh, this has to be, and this was in the 90s. Lucy Arnaz had put out a DVD set, and it was about finding your genealogy. Actually, before like an ancestry.com. Right. This is basically what it was. And I had seen her, I saw it on TV. She was like on one of the local shows, and she was doing it live, sort of like showing it and then showing some of what's on the DVDs at a screening. And I remember I told my sister, she's like, I want to come. So we go downtown, and there was Lucy Arnaz, and she talked about her parents. And I think she had just found like all of these old films, and that's one of the things that she put on the CD. I hate to say, I think I tossed it at some point. We had moved apartments last year, so I think that it didn't make it in the transition. Plus, I don't have a CD player anymore. But anyway, and we were watching it, and she had all these movies, and she had actually some film from Lucille Ball's childhood, from her childhood. So it was really, it was very interesting. Lucy Arnaz couldn't have been any nicer. She talked also, one of the things, and this sticks out in my mind, she talked about how back then the sponsors were the cigarette companies, where it was Philip Morris. And I mean, both are, Desi Arnaz obviously, passed of lung cancer, and, Lucy, although it was her heart, but listen, it's all connected. She was a longtime smoker, and just all of that. She was almost like advocating, like, don't smoke. She's like, it was different then. That's what they did, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so look, I could talk about this forever. It gets me like, we're very excited, but we're like Trekkies. We're like the equivalent of Trekkies or Comic-Con. But anyway, she was talking about the museum at the time, because I think it was sort of like in its infancy stage of when they were starting to like get things together. And it's put that town on the map. I mean, if it wasn't for Lucille Ball, it'd just be another town in upstate New York.
Right. And now Jamestown has the National Comedy Center too. Have you heard about that?
I do, because on my bucket list is also to perform as a stand-up comic on that stage. And I have comedian friends that have done that. I'm dying to do that. I don't know how I get into it. I mean, I've been doing comedy for 20 years, so it's not like I'm a professional. I am a professional. I'm more than capable of doing it, but it's hard. I'm sure it's kind of hard to get into. But yes, I know they've made it a little bit more inclusive of other comedians as well, historical comedians.
Yeah, that was Lucy's dream too, was to have a place in Jamestown where like up and coming comedians could learn the trade of comedy and things. She really wanted that in her hometown, and I think that's so nice.
So for everybody that kind of doesn't remember, so Lucille Ball passed away in 1987, was it?
89
in 1989. Okay. And so here are thoughts that she had, few years before, in the early 80s, before her death, or maybe even in the 70s, to have a vision like that, to think that far in advance, like nobody really thought about things like that. A center, there was no Comic-Con back then. They didn't have these conventions for entertainment like they do now. So again, it's just like they just were able to almost see into the future.
Yeah, she had a vision, and she was so smart. I think some people just view her as Lucy Ricardo, wacky, silly, but she was a brilliant businesswoman. And that's something that I try to show on my Instagram page, was Lucille Ball as the person, and that she wasn't like Lucy Ricardo in many ways.
So I want to hear from your perspective, since you have such insight, like give us sort of a journey. And I know, I know we only have only an hour, but like, just give us a journey of like, for people that maybe don't know her background, maybe they just know about I Love Lucy, or maybe they just know about one thing, but like, give us a little bit of a history of Lucille Ball. We know she was born in Jamestown. It was not, and I think it was 1912, 11. Her father died when she was young, but it like kind of started from there. She came to New York, and give us some history.
Mm-hmm. Well, she had a very rough childhood, like when her father died when she was 4, and her mom moved around because that's what her mom had to do. She had to find some work and to provide for Lucy and her younger brother. And then her mom remarried, and Lucy lived with her grandparents for many years when her mom moved away with her new husband. And so she had a really rough beginning. And so when she was about early teen years was when she got interested in performing in comedy. And her grandpa really introduced her to comedy. He took her to shows. And so she knew she wanted to be a performer in some way. And so eventually she went to New York City, and she tried to make it, and she was told that she would never make it as a star. They said, just give it up, go back home. But she didn't want to. She wanted to be a star. And so I love how she never gave up, but she had many setbacks. She had health complications too. When she was in New York, she had a really bad case of arthritis. And so she was basically like in bed, like she could not move around. And then eventually she got into modeling in her early 20s. And that's what opened the door to go to Hollywood, to be in one movie. And she just found her way. And when she was out in Hollywood, Ginger Rogers' mother took her in and helped her find other kinds of jobs and movie roles. So in the early 30s and 40s, she was like in a lot of B-roll movies. And that's basically how she got into Hollywood. And then she met Desi Arnaz, and she was in so many movies. And then I Love Lucy, and that's kind of the rest is history.
So with I Love Lucy, and again, just so fascinating. She met Desi Arnaz. For all accounts, it was obviously very passionate, and he was Cuban, and she was Irish American. And back then, that was not a conventional marriage. Right. So when they pitched I Love Lucy, which was originally a radio show, if I'm not right, My Favorite Husband,
right,
and with Gail Gordon, and they wanted Gail Gordon, who wound up playing Mr. Mooney later on. One thing I have to mention about Lucy too, she was so loyal to her friends that all of her friends worked with her throughout the years. And she brought them to all different shows, whether it was a guest appearance or whatever. Anyway, and the studio, CBS, said that there's no way that America is going to accept somebody that looks like you, Lucy, and a Cuban. And they decided, I guess it was, they couldn't get anybody to produce it, I believe was the story. And they decided to put up their own money, and they built pretty much their own sort of sound stage. And they did it. They took a gamble, and clearly we know what happened, and America loved it. And what was great, and which is what I love as a comedian, is they took this conflict and they made it funny. She made fun of his accent. He had a very Cuban personality, and I mean, it was which I get very frustrated as a comic because everybody today is so sensitive and you can't say anything and everybody's got feelings and they've got, and it's, and not, it doesn't mean, a joke doesn't mean that it's coming from a bad place or a mean place. So I love how they took, lemons and made lemonade. They took that and they incorporated it because part of them being different was also that he was Cuban.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And when the producer said, no, Desi can't be the husband, and Desi had a quote that said, well, maybe it can work because we have been married for 10 years. So it has worked, and America knew about Lucy and Desi, and so they just took a chance with it. And I'm so glad because Lucy really wanted Desi to be on the show because it was one way for her to try to make their marriage work too.
Yeah, she'd been obviously all very, very public. He was in a band and he traveled a lot, and and just like as a comic and in show business, we'll use the term loosely, but I understand, like sometimes, even as comedians, like we travel a lot, and it's very taxing just on you as a person. And a great gig is something that's like steady, a sitcom or something where you can just go to the same place every day and film it. So if you talk to anybody movie makers, even huge movie stars of today, they like, yes, but we travel, or I live in Australia 6 months out of the year for, this show or whatever. So, and back then there was no FaceTime. Again, there was the landline, there was no cell phone. So, if you can picture, take today, and I don't know, subtract 1 million, because, you guys, like, you roll letters, I guess, and
yes,
waiting for the phone call at 5:00. But just to get to Desi though, and I always want people to know this, tell us how brilliant Desi was.
Oh, he was amazing. I mean, he knew everything that was going on behind the scenes of I Love Lucy. And if he didn't know something, he learned it. And he wanted to know everything that was going on with the directing, the film editing, the writing. He looked at the scripts and he would offer his suggestions of something that didn't make sense or didn't work. He really put his opinion into everything on the show. And so he was a brilliant businessman, and that Desi Lou Studios, that was his passion in the film, the TV industry, that was his heart. And so he was just incredible. And I always try to showcase that too on my page sometimes when I talk about Desi, because I do feature Lucy prominently because it is everything Lucille Ball, but I try to showcase that Desi was just incredible as a businessman.
He also was the inventor of the 3-camera shoot, which is used today, even as we speak, on sitcoms. So he revolutionized how TV was filmed, and it was on film. He put it on film where previous it was on, I think it was called Kaleidoscope or something of that nature. And he knew we wanted to put it on film like films are to preserve it. So again, it's like, here is this man with, I completely agree with you. I think between the both of them, the brilliance, the foresight, the instinct, obviously they took the risks as well. It just doesn't get enough credit for what they've done for humanity.
Right.
I'm not being dramatic. I mean, really, the changes that they made changed people's lives, created employment that to this day is, still exists. And I think that is, their legacy is like, it's so deep, it's just so deep. And I think too, because they did such great work together on screen and off screen. And I mean, aren't you still heartbroken that they broke up? even though they both went on and married other people. And clearly Gary Morton was a very he was a comedian, also he was a stand-up, and he was really, he was a perfect, he was Lucy's perfect second husband.
Yes. I always talk about him sometimes on my page too, especially when it's their anniversary of their wedding. He was the husband that she needed for her second chapter in life, and he stayed home, and she really needed someone that she could trust to be home too.
He was solid.
Right.
He was solid. Yeah.
Yeah. And so so many people criticize Gary Morton, and that they criticize him because he wasn't Desi, but he was a really great second husband to her.
Oh yeah, no, he came at the right time. He was exactly what she needed. And I'm not here to disparage Desi Arnaz, but again, all this is public information. He wasn't exactly the most faithful husband. Unfortunately, we all wish that was not the case. He had a drinking problem, which, whether it was the pressures or whatever his propensity and his whatever that was, again, we all wish that didn't happen. I can't even imagine. Honestly, I mean, let's be compassionate. I can't imagine the stress that he was under, because at one point they were producing all these shows. I mean, they had their whole livelihood. They had tons of employees. Again, and in a non-technology world, when you needed someone, you had to go find them. I mean, we wrote scripts. I mean, there was a typewriter, but it was just so different in some ways, so much harder, so challenging. Building the sets, they didn't have the technology that they have today, even in tools, makeup, all of that, just everything that they did. But they really just, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, had made such an impact. And again, that's why I think we're all kind of brokenhearted that they never stayed married. And then Desi Arnaz also went on to marry someone that we don't really know that much about her. I believe her name is Edie. But it seemed like he was very happy, and she passed, I think, the year before that he did. And I mean, in the last bunch of years of his life, it was more retirement and just sort of kind of laid back and sad. He didn't age well. I mean, God, he was so handsome, but he didn't age well, and that was probably because of some of the things that
smoking,
the smoking and the drinking. I mean, and again, not in a day where anybody can get cosmetic surgery, and also let's just make people understand that back then, now we talk about issues and addictions and rehab, and I mean, there was none of that. So
there's just a different time for
totally different time. So they have this tremendous I Love Lucy run, and the last year or two that they did those hour episodes?
Yeah, it was the last, technically they call it the last 3 seasons of I Love Lucy, but it's considered a separate show, the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour episodes, and they were 1 hour. It was what Desi really wanted. He wanted them to be like mini movies. So he wanted to branch out into that and really develop the studio and just have big musical numbers and film off location, and they traveled more on the show, and so that was all Desi behind that.
And for us fans, huge fans, the last of those specials was with Ernie Kovacs, who was also a very famous comedian and died tragically before his time in a car accident. And that last scene of that last episode, they kiss, and you can see, because now we know the story, how emotional it was, because that next day Lucy served Desi with divorce papers.
Right.
So
it is like that last scene with that kiss, it is like this is it. This is our conclusion of our marriage too. And of course, I believe that Lucy and Ricky Ricardo stayed together forever, but that was the end for Lucy and Desi, and I think they both knew.
Yes. Yeah. Have you been able to talk to Lucy Arnaz, or does she know, or does Desi? I don't know if Desi Jr. is involved at all, but Lucy Arnaz is involved with the estate and the merchandising that they ultimately went on to do. Have you ever contacted her, or?
I've interacted with her just a few times, not that many times, but I would love to meet her someday. I would love to see her perform. She's so talented too. And so
you interacted with her at where? At the museum or?
No, just on Instagram, where I commented on a post or something and she would respond back, or once in a direct message, I sent her something and she just responded back. So very limited interaction, but I would love to see her someday.
She lives, I believe, in Palm Springs. And she used to do a cabaret show in New York. There's a place called Birdland, a jazz club. And I don't know. I haven't, sometimes like I would see her name on something, or we have the Carlisle Hotel over here. I mean, obviously, we've all gone through COVID, so things shut down, things opened up, things are opening up slowly. As you can see, this is, New York, and my homage to Broadway and for people hopefully coming back. But we haven't had much in terms of tourism, but people, I mean, we did the marathon today and it was jam packed. So that's a good sign. But anyway, so she would sometimes be at the Carlisle Hotel or something like that. So sometimes she does that, but she does performances, but she was also on Broadway. I mean, she is very talented, as was Desi Jr., but I think she took a more acting, I think her career was a little bit more active in that, in that she also married a man who's an actor.
Yes. Larry Luckenbill.
Yeah, Larry Luckenbill. Yeah. Because he's also a Broadway actor. So, but there is a Lucy and Desi movie coming out with Nicole Kidman, and is it not Javier? Is it Javier
Bardem?
Bardem. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have mixed opinions, I guess, because I don't know. There's a lot of confusion on the direction that it's going to go and the storyline, because the way that it's described, it takes place in 1 week of production of I Love Lucy, and like 3 major events that happen with Lucy, the red scandal that she had, where they thought that she was a communist, but so she had to fight that, and then Desi's infidelity, and then they said one other event, which I think will probably be the pregnancy storyline. That's my guess. But those events took place years apart from each other. And so I'm kind of confused why they're going to be showing them happening in 1 week. Just, it seems kind of cluttered, but maybe that's the direction that the writer Aaron Sorkin wanted to go in. But I'm going to watch it just to be able to comment on it and to review about it. I'm going to watch it, but we'll see.
Well, it's not the first movie. There have been a lot of TV movies about them as well. They're always, I'm not thrilled with Nicole Kidman playing Lucille Ball. No offense to Nicole Kidman. She's done a lot of great work. She seems like a nice person, but I really would have preferred an American actress. And one of the last things I watched Nicole Kidman on was, I think it was The Undoing or something. And then she's in Big Little Lies, which, I mean, she listed, was it Big Little Lies, right? Big Little Lies. Okay, well, again, amazing and all that stuff. But I can hear sometimes the Australian accent, or her struggling to get because she's always playing an American.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, kudos. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I hope I don't hear the same thing, because Lucy was anything but Australian.
Right. I was surprised when the casting was announced with her, because I I don't know. I just could not picture her being Lucy. And the first trailer that came out a few weeks ago, they were very careful not to show Nicole as Lucy. I think to kind of avoid any criticism or to just keep everyone in suspense. I don't know. But it was puzzling to me that they casted her. I would have preferred like an up and coming actor.
Well, I think for Desi, I'm okay with Javier. What's his last name?
Javier Bardem.
Because I can even see the resemblance, and of course he's Spanish, but Spanish Spain, not necessarily Cuban, but okay, that's fine. But her, I mean, I think one of the people that probably wanted it was Deborah Messing, because Deborah Messing I'm not saying Deborah Messing is Lucy, but I think they try to put her as sort of like the modern day. But I would have preferred, I mean, she could have, they could have made her up. But anyway, we will see. I just hope it's not some slander, because there is many generations that don't know anything about it. That's why I'm just amazed at how young you are, and how I feel like I'm talking to one of my contemporaries. So I just don't want their reputation to be tarnished. I would rather, I hope they show the brilliance of these people and not just the gossip.
Yes, I hope so too. I hope that they paint them in a positive light. The way that, yes, they had scandals and they had personal dramas in their life, but they were also brilliant. And I just really hope that the movie paints them in a good way. And I think with Lucy Arnaz being involved too, she was one of the producers of it. So
okay, good.
That she had her say in some way.
What happened? Do you know what Desi Jr. is doing at all?
I mean, last I checked and I've heard about, he lives a very private life, and he lost his wife a few years ago. And so he lives in privacy. And so we respect that. I think he's involved in the movie too, as a producer. Okay. I think whatever Lucy Arnaz is, she always has his opinion and too, but he lives in privacy and we respect that.
He also, when Lucille Ball did her third show, Here's Lucy. Well, I guess, it would be her third show. Then the last show was, what was the one that she tried? The last show that she did?
Life with Lucy.
Life with Lucy, right. Okay, so the show before, Here's Lucy, which was also a big hit. I mean, she was the #1 show on CBS in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Right.
So that's in Here's Lucy, the one that was in the 70s. She put Lucy and Desi in them. Well, did she do it in the Lucy show? Was Lucy Arnaz in the Lucy show?
She was just in a few episodes as a background character. And Desi was also in just a few episodes, but Here's Lucy, they were prominent characters.
They were her kids. They were her kids in the show, and then Desi Arnaz Jr. Had his own fame as a heartthrob and was in a band, and he sang. And again, it's interesting, like those two, the offspring are incredibly talented as well. So, and then he had, he was hooked up with Liza Minnelli and this one and that one.
Oh, yes.
He had his
Patty Duke too.
And he had a string of starlets and stuff. But I'm sorry to hear about his wife. That's very, very sad. But I wanted to kind of bring it back to a little bit more of the Lucy history. So can you give us sort of a little bit about the Lucy show? Because she did bring, again, her friends. Vivian Vance was in that sort of on and off. I believe that was the show that I don't know if it was that one or Here's Lucy that she introduced Carol Burnett, because she was Carol Burnett's mentor for the most part. So can you tell us a little bit about the Lucy show? Because now this is post Desi. It's not Lucy Ricardo. She's still Lucy, but she wasn't Lucy Carmichael. What was she in the Lucy show?
Lucy Carmichael, yeah.
In the Lucy show as well as Here's Lucy?
Yeah. Here's Lucy, she was Lucy Carter.
Okay. Thank you. You would know. Okay. So how did that whole, come about?
Yeah, well, the Lucy show, Desi Arnaz was a producer of it for the first season, or like a few episodes of the first season. So they were still working together. And then she really branched out and she took over the studio. She bought him out of the rights. And so she was the president of Desilu and started the show. She had Vivian Vance, and I prefer the earlier seasons of the Lucy show that had Vivian. They just worked so well together. They were continuation of Lucy and Ethel, but just in a different way. And then Gail Gordon being added on. And like you were talking about, she was very loyal to her friends and the people. She had Mary Jane Croft on the show in the later seasons too. And she was just so loyal to her people. And you mentioned Carol Burnett. She was added as a guest star in a few episodes in like the last season of the Lucy show. And then she started Here's Lucy, kind of branching out, bringing the kids in. And a lot of people say that they prefer Here's Lucy over the Lucy show because the kids being added to the show.
What years was here? What year? So I Love Lucy ended in 1960 for that last, like that 13 episode, like 57, and then and then from 1957 to 1960 were those hour-long ones, and there's 13 of them. When did the Lucy show start?
1961 until, and then Here's Lucy was right after that run. So the Lucy show lasted for 6 seasons, and then Here's Lucy was in 1968.
Oh, it was in 68. Oh, okay. And then that ran until when?
I think might be 1973, I think. Or 74. I'm not totally sure about that. But
and then I think the Lucy show is black and white, right? I don't think that was ever in color. Here's Lucy was in color.
Yeah, the Lucy show was only in black and white for the first season. So seasons 2 through 6, it was in color.
So let's talk about Fred and Ethel. And what I love, first of all, the whole, the whole gang, but let's talk about Ethel. Lucy and Ethel is still in today's vernacular, right? Like, like, as a matter of fact, I have 2 sisters, but one of them, she's my Lucy and I'm the Ethel. I mean, and I love when I hear people make that reference, because again, it keeps them alive. So again, if you're familiar with the show, it's in the vernacular of the friend the kooky friend with the ideas and the one that's going to go along with it, So let's talk about that for a second. So Vivian Vance, who was very different from Ethel, who I read a biography about Vivian Vance. I mean, unfortunately, she had some bad marriages, and she had her own, issues, her own mental issues, or emotional issues, let's say. And again, everybody, no therapy. People didn't talk about their feelings. I mean, it was just such a different time. You were just, if there was something off balance, that was it. You still had to function as well as you possibly could with like no support. So talk about Vivian Vance and like where they found her, and then the relationship and what relationship her and Lucy had over the years.
So Vivian Vance did a lot of Broadway early on. She was Broadway and also touring plays. And so she was in a play out in California at the time, and Jess Oppenheimer, the producer of I Love Lucy, saw her in a show, brought Desi to go watch. And so that's how they discovered Vivian Vance, is that she could be a good consideration for Ethel. So they brought her in, and the people always think that Vivian Vance and Lucille Ball didn't get along, but that's not the case. They got along. They were good friends behind the scenes. And of course they had to be, or else Lucy wouldn't have asked her to be on the Lucy show too. And so their relationship was pretty similar to Lucy and Ethel, but they were professional friends behind the scenes, and they truly, truly loved each other.
What a chemistry.
Yeah.
I mean, what a chemistry. And that comedic timing, I mean, with all of them, was just so spot on. You can see, looking back, I mean, that Vivian Vance was a trained actress. Was there any other actresses that were considered to play Ethel?
Mm-hmm. Lucy wanted B. Benaderet to be Ethel because she played the Ethel type of character on My Favorite Husband. And so that was her first choice, and they were really good friends, but she couldn't be on the show because she was already contracted for something else. And then she wanted Barbara Pepper, who was a great character actor. She wanted her to be Ethel, but she couldn't because she had an alcohol problem and everything. And so she couldn't be on the show, but Lucy was loyal to her and had her guest star in some episodes. So she's often in the background. So Lucy was really loyal to her because they were in the first movie that Lucy made, Roman Scandals. Her first movie that she made in Hollywood, she met Barbara. And so they stayed friends. And so she was always loyal to her and helped her find different roles in her career. And so those were the two prominent names that I remember.
And then later on, she went on to do the Lucy show, with her. But from what I remember and from what I read, I think it sounded like Vivian Vance, after some years, wanted to just sort of, retire from acting, or just, I don't want to say retire, like not do anything, but just, not do it anymore, change whatever, or just sit back. And she had moved, right, I believe, to the East Coast. So there was like some travel back and forth.
Right. Her health was getting pretty bad at that point too. And she just, it's a lot to be on a TV show week after week. And it was just too much for her. And so she wanted to be more relaxed and moved out to Connecticut, I think.
I remember, when I realized that Vivian Vance didn't live anymore, and I was like very upset. It was like very, it was very, very sad. But she really, again, the second banana, as they say, the friend, the supporting role. When I say I love to be on a sitcom, I would love the Ethel role. Like that to me was, every time I got a question, about, I'm like, I would love to be an Ethel. Like I the friend, the friend going along, right, trying to be the logical one. And I have to tell you something before I forget. So when I started to do acting classes years ago, so my background is very weird. I started my life as an accountant and I worked in finance. So, but I went to, I always, like I said, I always tell, this is how I open up. It's like, I watched a lot of I Love Lucy. I always wanted to do that. Finally, when I was a grown adult, I took acting classes. I started with an improv, and I got curious and whatnot. Anyway, I studied with this one teacher who was the teacher that told me to do stand-up comedy, Penny Templeton. I love her. And I'll never forget the example she used about acting. And she used it with Lucy. She goes, Lucy was real. Lucy, no matter what circumstances she was, whatever it was, whether she was dressed up as a Martian, whatever it was, she was real. She was in her truth. She believed in what she did. She was serious, even though it was funny. She was committed. That's how you act, that no matter what it is, you believe it. And she used it as a great example. She's like, you laugh at her, but it was to her, it was whatever she was doing was serious.
Yeah, she had a great quote where she says, I'm never funny. I'm just being honest. And she was so serious and committed to everything that she was doing. Sometimes it makes me sad that she didn't always think that she was funny in some ways, but she was a little insecure and she was kind of shy as in her personal life. And so sometimes when I think about that, it's hard to imagine when you watch her perform that she could ever be like a shy introvert.
Right. because she always came across as confident, and she had the boisterous, the voice, and she just projected, and she's never hesitated when she spoke, and she was quick and quick-witted. Very interesting. Well, insecurity is implied in any person in the performing arts. Because especially the kind of work that it is, and you put yourself out there, and a lot of people mistake and they go, oh, Lucille Ball, that's why you do stand-up. And I'm like, Lucille Ball wasn't a stand-up comedian. She was a comedic actress.
Right.
There's a difference. People confuse Tina Fey that way. It's like, she's not a stand-up, she's a comedic actress. So
Lucy would always be kind of nervous too if she had to do interviews, like when she was on Johnny Carson. People expected her to be funny all the time, and that wasn't her. Like, a lot of her comedic acting was because someone else wrote the funny lines for her, and she was able to deliver it in a hilarious way, but she wasn't just naturally funny.
And let's go back to your Instagram page for a second, and then I want to talk about Fred, because we're running out of time, and I could talk to you, I just could say, for hours. But you also, again, pay in every, and please follow Kasy, everything Lucille Ball on Instagram. You pay a lot of homage and honor, and make mention a lot of the writers. Name the writers again, and they were writers also after I Love Lucy. They did tons and tons of shows.
It was Jess Oppenheimer and Bob Carroll Jr. and Madeline Pugh Davis.
Now, were Madeline Pugh Davis and Bob married?
No, they weren't, but a lot of people think that they should have been married to each other because they spent so much time together throughout their whole career. They started in radio together. A lot of people kind of ship them together, thinking that they should have been together, but they weren't.
So funny. So you also mentioned a lot of the background players. A lot of Lucy's friends, the ones that have appeared in the episode. You talked about Marianne Croft, you put her on there. And then what I love about your page too is but you put a history. You just don't write their name when they're born, just something biographical about them. All this information, this TV history information. We have to talk about Fred Mertz, William Frawley. Had to be a very interesting person off stage. So tell us what you know about how that whole thing evolved.
Right. He actually requested to be on I Love Lucy. He heard about it and he called Lucille Ball up and he said, can I be on this show? Like something like that. And she's like, okay, we'll see. Because she wanted Gail Gordon to be Fred Mertz, but he also had a contract conflict. But his requirements, if he was going to be on I Love Lucy, was that he could not show up drunk because he had a drinking problem as well. And he promised that he would not show up drunk. And he kept that promise. Yeah. And so he was the perfect choice to be Fred. He delivered lines just so naturally and perfect timing. He was just fantastic.
Now talk about what you know about him and Vivian Vance.
A lot of people, the story is that they did not get along, and it's true, they weren't best friends, of course, but they remained professional. Of course, they weren't fighting all the time backstage. It wasn't like that, but they weren't friends, so to speak. They came in, they did their job, and they respected each other. And I think that's important to note, that they respected each other as colleagues. I mean, sometimes you have a colleague that you don't like as a friend, but you work together, and that was their relationship.
And wasn't there an opportunity for them to do a spinoff of Fred and Ethel?
Yeah, they wanted to do the Mertzes and have a show just on them, which I don't think would have worked anyway, because you really needed Lucy and Ricky, Fred and Ethel, the four friends together. But they wanted to have a spinoff, and Vivian Vance said no. I think just because she probably didn't want to work with him all the time.
Right. It'd be a little bit more intense, right? It'd be obviously a much more intense
Yeah,
working relationship.
really more involved than she wanted to be.
Right. There is an episode of Here's Lucy where William Frawley, and I believe it was his last appearance on anything. And I've seen the clip where I think she's like in a horse stable or something, and she's walking backwards, and he's sweeping, and she bumps into him, and I forgot what he said, but and she goes, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" And he's like, no. If you could YouTube it, it's hilarious. It's so funny. It's so fun. Of course, the audience goes crazy. They probably didn't, I don't know if they brought him out as a surprise, again, all live audience. So I'm not quite sure. Could you imagine having been in that audience, for one of those shows? So
that was an episode of the Lucy show really later on, and in color, and he just comes on for like 20 seconds. I think that's all it is, but he gets a round of applause from the audience, and he says maybe 2 lines, and that's it. But his timing is perfect, just like Fred. Just like
my recollection of watching it is I felt because the audience went so crazy, I felt like they didn't know, and they got the art.
They probably didn't.
I
guess they probably didn't know that he was going to be there, which I love.
You mentioned earlier also about Lucy with having arthritis, and that really blows my mind because she was known for her physical comedy, and she did pratfalls and all types of things into her 60s. And again, let's just bring everybody to reality. There was no like holistic medicine, collagen, like all of the things that we know now and do now, and back then, I don't know what they had, aspirin, if they like Bengay or something, so she really, I kept herself, she smoked too. So I'm not quite sure how all that, transpired, but she did a lot of physical comedy, and that's a lot of things that I would just crazy.
She wasn't afraid to try something if the script called for it. And Madeline Pugh talked about that, where whatever they put in a script, Lucy would try it, and she wasn't afraid because she knew that it would entertain people. She did whatever to entertain her audience. So she loved her audience so much, and I love that for her.
What is your favorite, or one of your, your couple of few favorites I Love Lucy episodes?
Well, my favorite is LA at Last, and I talk about that on my page a lot, because I have a very special memory too with that, and I could tell the story if we have time to.
Yes,
okay. Well, when I was 2 years old, way back when, I was at Kmart with my mom, and I was sitting in the front seat of the shopping cart, and I just started saying, "I kissed Bill Holden. I kissed Bill Holden." And of course, that's a line from that episode, and my mom's just like, what? And she knew what I was saying because she also is a fan of I Love Lucy. And so I must have just recently watched that episode. But so that from a 2-year-old on, I mean, that episode really started my love for I Love Lucy and everything. And so that episode really has a special place in my heart. Mm-hmm. It's so good. Every scene in that episode is fantastic. And William Holden, you can't go wrong with him too.
Okay, I realize you're in your 20s, but I think you must have lived another life another time ago, because
that's what people tell me all the time. That
you're like William Holden. Oh my gosh, you're so fun. That's so fun. That's awesome. That is so awesome. There's so many episodes. There was 179 in total. Mm-hmm. I loved. There's something about the kitchen, I think, because it reminds me of my great grandmother's kitchen. Mm-hmm. I do love when she tried to be domestic, and then that sort of like messed up, like the bread, the whole bread thing. And I always used to love how I think I used to play this when I was like a little girl, like how they'd all have people over for bridge, and she'd be all dressed in like a beautiful, her beautiful, party dress in her house. And like, when I think about those things, like, again, this like simpler time where people didn't need 9,000 gadgets to be stimulated, like they could sit down and play bridge or talk, or and their little clubs and their Wednesday afternoon clubs, and of course the clothing. I love the clothing. I have a teenage niece that loves fashion, and I am so thrilled that because she's got her own Instagram page as well, and she loves like the 40s look, the tight, like the skirts that they used to wear and the jackets. I'm thrilled that her generation is looking at these clothes because they're beautiful, and women were so stylish. And I mean, I live in New York City, so when I was a kid, like things have evolved. Even like the theater, I remember as a kid and going to the theater, people like dressed up, not in tuxedos, but it's like now. You're lucky if somebody's wearing, socks, or, they come in flip-flops or whatever. I mean, so we don't have that anymore, but I love the clothes. I love that. I loved all that. And I thought when they moved to Connecticut, I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh yeah. I love the Connecticut episodes too. It feels like the end of I Love Lucy too, but that Connecticut house is like a dream house for me. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, the early American. Because when I was a kid, I grew up in Manhattan, but when I was in high school, we did move. We moved to the suburbs, and then later I just kind of came back. But I relate to living in a city apartment, this getting crowded and wanting to move to the country, so I totally, I totally understood all that from their perspective. And so everybody also knows their address was 623 East 68th Street.
Yes.
Right. And that does not exist. That would be in the middle of the East River, because it only goes up to the 500 series on 68th Street.
Okay.
And then there's the river. So it was interesting, but so that didn't exist. But I like some of their New York. I love the fact, of course, also that even though it was all in LA, that it took place in New York, and they, as a New Yorker, they did really bring that New York essence to it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've never talked to someone who's from New York and having that perspective before.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what can we look forward to on your page? What inspires you? What are you going to be putting? I can't begin to tell you how much I have enjoyed, and you put so much content. I'm like trying to scroll through my phone. I mean, I am just so impressed with the research. Like, how many hours a week do you spend on this?
I mean, it's all in my free time, of course. And I just try to have posts that I think would inform people. I think this is part of me being a writer, where it helps, where I just inform people something that they might not know about. And I don't care if someone already knows about it, because someone won't know this fact about Lucy or I Love Lucy. And so I always try to have like an engaging photo or a video, and then provide the history behind it. And so I have Lucy's memoir here, and Love Lucy. If you've never read this book, it is a great resource. It's in her own words. So that's where I've learned a lot about Lucy. And so I try to share that excerpts and quotes and things on my page. And so I just try to make it fun for Lucy fans.
Well, I want to thank you for putting us on notice that on October, what day was that? October 15th, 1951 was the 70th anniversary. So a few weeks ago, when it was October 15th, 2021, you were, honestly, it was your page that led me to realize that it was the 70th anniversary and not CBS, which as a matter of fact, somebody posted on Facebook, because I took your post, which I wrote, because I'm also on Facebook. I don't know if you're on Facebook or just Instagram.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook too, but I use it less. I use Instagram the most.
Yeah, this is what you do with the, the Instagram is perfect for what you're doing with all the Lucille Ball stuff. But I put it on there, and somebody was like, "How come CBS didn't do something?" So I thought that was kind of weird.
That's my exact thought too. I thought they could have done some kind of tribute, or even have just a night of airing 2 episodes or so. They could have done something to honor the show. And so I was a little disappointed in CBS that they didn't really promote the 70th anniversary at all.
I think that the Christmas episode that I don't know if that aired during the regular run, because I feel like it was something that was discovered later or came on the air later.
It did. It was in the 6th season. Yeah.
Was so then they colorized it. But I think like when that episode runs, which I'm assuming they're going to do it again this year, it's like one of the most watched episodes of that night, of what shows of that night.
Right. It always has high ratings. And so they didn't have one last year. And I hope that they have one this year. If they are, the announcement should be coming the next few days, because it's going to be Christmas before we even know it. Right. But I hope so. I hope they do. It's always fun too to watch it with fellow Lucy fans.
Yes. And you did something a few weeks ago for the 70th anniversary, and you had like this trivia game going. I love you. We have to meet. Like, I have to come to Tahoe and get a gig or something. We have to hang out. I just think you're so fabulous. You will make you should think about being a manager or something. I don't know. You got a lot of talent, girl. You should even write your own book about Lucy, like My Love with Lucy, or I don't know, something. I'm sure
I would love to do that. I have question, and it's an idea to maybe make an online magazine, kind of something. I would love to have, or some kind of blog that people could go to. I mean, my Instagram page is kind of like a blog,
right,
in that sense, but have another like an official website too, where I would call it Everything Lucille Ball as well. It's an idea that I have, and so maybe sometime I will do that.
So nobody's come to you, like you put some clips on, like no one's come to you to say, hey, you can't put that on, or I mean, that's all okay. Not that you're the only one putting clips about TV shows, but I'm just saying, like, I don't even know how that works.
Yeah, CBS is pretty strict with the any clips that I share can't be more than 20 seconds.
Okay.
So I have to be really careful with how I edit the clips. And so I put them together, compilation. And for the 70th anniversary, I was doing a live stream where I was showing episodes or different clips, and that live stream was blocked by CBS too. So I have to be really careful. Right. CBS is very strict with the copyrights.
Right. Well, and that's just,
it's understandable. They own
it's indicative. That's how it just works in show business. I mean, even with music too, you can't use, more than 20 seconds and all that other stuff. So, but I mean, you put so much content out there. There is a website that is on your page that takes me to like a podcast, like the link. If I go to your page, there's a link. The plot thickens at TMC. Well, so what is that? Because I went and I looked at it, but that was somebody's podcast about.
Right. That is Turner Classic Movies. Their 3rd season of the podcast, The Plot Thickens, is all about Lucille Ball.
Oh, okay.
And so I've been listening to the episodes, and I've reviewed them too. And so I just leave that link for anyone who wants to go listen to them.
Oh, okay. I definitely will. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and for saying yes. First of all, it's like, like, who is this? And doing what you do. You brought, I'm going to speak for all your 18,000 followers. You bring me joy. It's so, nice to, I look forward to what you're going to post every day or whenever, or when I get on, and it's fun. It's just fun.
Thank you.
I really thought I knew so much, and I love it. I just love what you do. I love everything that you put out there, and you have absolutely, I've really, first of all, kept her alive. In Greek, I was saying when people pass, we say, may their memory be eternal, to keep, you keep them alive. And you have really kept her memory eternal, in talking about her all the time. And, it's almost like I feel like the shows are still here, like they're airing and to her and to her and to the whole team. So,
right.
which really, normally it's really either her, and then again, there's an offshoot with Desi, but you've like encapsulated the background actors, which, by the way, I've done a lot of background work, so thank you for that, and a lot of the creative people. So it's really quite the historical piece. So I love it.
Thank you.
That.
That means so much to me, and if I could just be part of the legacy in some way, that means so much to me. It's why I make the post. I make the post for fellow Lucy fans, and it's just a great community of people. I love seeing the comments and things, and just interacting with each other. I just love it.
Is there any other TV shows that have had this, or any other actors and actresses that have had this impact on you?
I also love the Dick Van Dyke Show, and I have an Instagram page about that show as well. And so that's my second favorite classic TV show. Dick Van Dyke, fantastic comedic actor as well.
Well, he's still alive.
Yes.
If you can, track him down to try to interview him, that would be.
I would love to. Yeah, I sent him a fan letter when he was when he received his Kennedy Center honor. So I sent him a fan letter. So.
Well, now with social media, I mean, I don't know, who knows? Maybe you can make your way to, it's easier to connect with people than just,
right.
Sending right. But Kasy Long, we thank you. Everybody, please, 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 please follow Kasy's fantastic page, Everything Lucille Ball. It will take your mind off of the stresses of life. They're fun, they're insightful, and if you haven't really gotten into Lucy, or have only seen it, or haven't seen it in a long time, reconnect yourself with this genius. Kasy does such a great job, and it's great. It's informative. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are welcome on this podcast anytime. If you just do another, have another page like this where you're, really exploding and whatnot, whatever you want, you are always welcome on Karis's Comedy Corner.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. This is my first podcast I've ever done, but I've always wanted to do a podcast just talking about I Love Lucy. I always say that I should, if there was a way to have a PhD in Lucille Ball, I would totally have that. So I love talking about the show with people.
Well, listen, who knows, colleges have curriculums on TV, and, maybe it's a course that you can give to filmmakers that are, sitcom writers or something. I mean, I think you are a writer, I think you would be perfect. So hang on, I'm going to sign off, and then I just want to talk to you for a moment.
Okay.
So we thank Kasy Long for all of her wonderful, wonderful work that we enjoy so much here on Karis Comedy Corner. My name is Ellen Karis. Please follow me on Instagram at Greek Chick Comic, Twitter at Greek Chick Comic, Facebook, Ellen Karis Greek Goddess Comedy, or my website. Go to my website, ellenkaris.com, where this podcast will be, as well as the other ones that we've done every week for the last 6 seasons. I thank you very much. Until next time, bye.